Have you ever noticed how some people don't value your story until they can use it? They smile, they listen, they nod like they care. But behind their eyes, they're not storing wisdom. They're collecting it. Not to grow, but to gain. And the moment you turn your back, your words become theirs. Your lessons become their performance. And suddenly, you're watching your pain echoed in their voice, with no credit, no gratitude, just imitation dressed as insight. It's like someone taking your USB drive, not to learn, but to copy. They don't ask how the files got there, how long you spent writing, editing, failing, and starting over. They just plug it in, duplicate everything, and act like it was always theirs. Or think of a student who never showed up to class, but borrows your notes, then speaks like the ideas came from them. That's not learning, that's quiet theft pretending to be inspiration. Because while they're busy borrowing your words, your mindset, your confidence, you have a choice. Keep giving or protect what's yours. The moment you stop, they panic, because it was never about learning, it was always about taking. So how do you stop them from using your story without bitterness, without confrontation, without losing your peace? Stay until the end, because the last sign, it doesn't just reveal them, it frees you. Let's get started. Number 1, they only come around when they need advice. Let's talk about one of the most subtle yet exhausting forms of being used. Someone who only reaches out when they need your advice. At first, it feels flattering. They trust your perspective, they value your opinion, they need your wisdom. But over time, you notice a pattern. They vanish during your lowest points. When you're struggling, they're nowhere to be found. But the moment they're confused, stuck, or chasing something they don't fully understand, they magically reappear in your inbox, not to check on you, not to reconnect, but to extract insight, as if your time and experience are theirs to tap into whenever they please. Here's the truth. They're not looking for connection. They're looking for free guidance. They treat you like a walking search engine, not a human being. They don't invest in you. They don't ask how you've been. They just want answers. And once they get what they came for, they disappear again until the next time they hit a wall. That's not friendship. That's not mutual respect. That's a transaction disguised as connection. This is where Stoic wisdom draws the line. Epictetus once said, "Don't pour your wisdom into cups that only want to drink, not listen." In other words, not everyone who comes to you for knowledge deserves it. Because wisdom isn't just something you give, it's something sacred that should be received with humility. If someone only values what you know, not who you are, then what they're doing isn't admiration, it's exploitation. Let me share a story. A man I know, let's call him Travis, was the kind of person people turned to when life got confusing. He was calm, thoughtful, and had been through enough storms to offer real guidance. But he began noticing something strange with a certain co-worker. This guy, Greg, would go silent for months. No texts, no calls, not even a hello when passing in the office. But every few weeks, like clockwork, Greg would show up at Travis's desk needing advice, business stuff, relationship decisions, even personal doubts. Travis gave what he could, but every time, once Greg got what he needed, he was gone. No thanks, no follow-up, no genuine interest in Travis's life. Eventually, Travis stopped offering deep advice, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. Because he realized Greg wasn't looking for wisdom, he was looking for shortcuts. So how do you handle people like this? First, observe the pattern. If someone only contacts you when they need clarity, but disappears when you're the one in need, that's your answer. Second, set boundaries. Not all insight must be shared, especially not with people who won't value it. And finally, remember, your life experience is not a public resource. If they can't show up for you, they don't deserve to benefit from what life has taught you. At the end of the day, your wisdom wasn't given to you cheaply. It was earned, so protect it. Share it where it will grow, not where it will be drained. Number 2, they talk like they understand what you've lived, but haven't lived it. Let's talk about one of the most uncomfortable signs that someone is trying to use your experience for their benefit. It's when they begin to speak your language, but they haven't walked your path. They start quoting things you've said, echoing ideas you've shared, or mimicking mindsets you spent years developing. But instead of acknowledging where it came from or honoring the weight behind it, they wear your wisdom like a borrowed coat, pretending they tailored it themselves. It's subtle, it's quiet, but it stings in a way that's hard to explain. Because what they're doing isn't admiration, it's silent appropriation. Here's the hard truth. When someone adopts your experience as their own, without having lived it, they're not trying to learn, they're trying to leverage. They want the insight without the struggle, the voice without the journey. And worst of all, they position themselves as if they've always thought this way, as if they arrived at this wisdom entirely on their own. That's not respect, that's erasure. The Stoics warned us about this. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The wise man gives freely, but not to those who trample what they receive." In other words, sharing your perspective is noble, but only if it lands in respectful hands. If someone takes what you've learned through pain, sacrifice, and time and treats it like a costume to wear at their convenience, they're not honoring your growth, they're stealing it. And not just stealing it, but repackaging it for their benefit, often without giving anything back. Let me tell you about someone I knew. His name was Aaron. He had spent years rebuilding his mindset after a difficult childhood, using journaling, philosophy, and reflection to slowly piece together his piece. He wasn't loud about it, but those close to him knew the journey. One friend in particular, Drew, started picking up Aaron's language. At first it seemed harmless. Drew admired him, asked questions, but slowly Aaron began to hear his words repeated in rooms he wasn't in. Quotes he'd shared now came from Drew's mouth as if they were his own. Deep concepts Aaron had wrestled with were now social media captions for Drew's self-branding. And whenever someone asked where those insights came from, Drew just smiled, never mentioning the late-night talks, the notebooks, the real path someone else had walked. So how do you deal with that? First, don't waste your energy trying to prove ownership. Your journey is your proof. Second, tighten your circle. Not everyone who listens deserves access to your experience. And finally, realize this: your wisdom doesn't lose value because someone misuses it. It remains yours, earned, tested, and real. At the end of the day, when someone tries to sound like they've lived what you've lived without actually walking it, that's not respect. It's imitation dressed as insight. Let them speak, but keep growing, because while they mimic, you're still evolving, and no one can fake that. If you found this valuable, hit like and subscribe for more powerful insights. Number 3, they never credit you for your influence. Let's talk about one of the most frustrating signs that someone is trying to use your experience for their benefit. It's when they absorb your energy, your growth, your evolution, and then present it to the world as if it were born from them. They adopt your mindset, they mirror your discipline, they start using your phrases, your structure, your ways of thinking. But when people praise them for their newfound clarity or strength, they never mention your name, not once. Here's the truth. There's a difference between being inspired by someone and silently mining them. Inspiration leads to gratitude. It lifts both people. But when someone takes what they've learned from you, your hard-earned lessons, your worldview, even your emotional language, and acts like they figured it all out on their own, that's not inspiration. That's erasure. It doesn't just feel disrespectful, it feels invisible. You gave them a light when they were lost, and now that they've found a bit of footing, they're acting like the lantern was always in their own hand. They want the progress, not the path, the wisdom, not the witness. They want the destination, but they'll deny the map that got them there. Epictetus once said, "To steal one's path and deny the lantern that lit it is to walk blind." And that's exactly what these people do. They may shine briefly, but the glow doesn't last. Because real growth isn't just about how far you go. It's about how you honor those who helped you walk when your legs were shaking. When someone refuses to credit their influence, they reveal more about their insecurity than their independence. Let me tell you a story. A guy I once knew, let's call him Brandon, was mentored by a close friend named Elijah. For over a year, Elijah had encouraged him through burnout, helped him rebuild a morning routine, taught him about mindfulness, emotional maturity, and how to shift his mindset after a breakup. Brandon soaked it all in. He changed, grew, started giving advice to others, but over time he began speaking like he'd always been this evolved. He quoted philosophies Elijah had introduced him to, told others about his discoveries, and painted himself as self-taught. Elijah never asked for praise, but the complete omission felt deliberate, like he had become a footnote in someone else's story he helped write. So how do you respond to that? First, remember this: real ones don't need credit to keep growing. Your value isn't reduced just because someone refuses to acknowledge it. Second, distance yourself. Energy thieves often disguise themselves as admirers. And third, stop offering your fire to those who only want the warmth, not the source. At the end of the day, what you gave wasn't small. You helped someone see in the dark. If they can't honor that, let them find out what it's like to walk alone again, because your influence was a gift, not a given. Number 4, they offer praise, then position themselves as equal. Let's talk about one of the most deceptive signs that someone is trying to use your experience for their benefit. It's when someone starts by admiring you, praising your insight, and seeking your help, only to slowly shift the dynamic. After gaining clarity, wisdom, and direction from you, they begin presenting themselves as your equal. Sometimes they even slip into the role of offering you advice, as if the tables have turned. What began as gratitude becomes quiet competition. What began as mentorship becomes mimicry. It's subtle at first. They still smile, still speak kindly, but their tone changes. Instead of asking questions, they start offering you unsolicited guidance. Instead of acknowledging how much they learned from you, they act like they were always on your level. The transformation feels strange. You watch someone stand on ground they didn't even know existed until you showed it to them. And now they act like they built it. Here's the truth: they're not trying to grow beside you, they're trying to replace you. That initial admiration was real, yes, but once they took what they needed, the ego took over. Now they want recognition. Now they want to be seen as the one with answers. It's not that they no longer value you, it's that they want others to value them more. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Those who rush to rise beside you often forget who helped them climb." That's what this is. It's a forgetting, not of facts, but of humility. Instead of continuing to grow with gratitude, they rewrite the story to favor themselves. They minimize the ladder they once climbed so no one sees how high they had to reach, and in doing so, they pretend their rise was self-made. Let me share a story. A woman I know, let's call her Emily, spent months helping a younger colleague, Sarah, navigate a major career transition. Emily helped her develop skills, refine her communication, and introduced her to a few key contacts. Sarah was thankful at first, but as soon as Sarah gained confidence and recognition, the dynamic shifted. She stopped crediting Emily and started subtly implying that they were peers, that they had grown together rather than one guiding the other. In meetings, she spoke over Emily. On social media, she posted insights Emily had shared, but never once mentioned the source. Eventually, Sarah even offered Emily advice on managing new responsibilities, as if they were at the same level now. So what do you do when someone tries to stand beside you by pretending they never stood behind you? First, don't argue for your role. The truth doesn't need defending. Second, stop pouring into people who can't handle the humility success requires. And third, keep growing. Quietly, confidently. The ones who know, know. At the end of the day, your light isn't dimmed just because someone else tries to reflect it as their own. You lit the path, and whether they acknowledge it or not, they'll never unwalk the road you built. If you've watched the video this far, don't forget to leave a comment with a thank God and give it a like if you enjoyed the content. Your support means a lot and motivates me to keep creating more interesting videos. I hope you find inspiration in them and that we continue learning together. Thank you for your support. Number 5. They insist you help them with everything. Let's talk about one of the clearest signs that someone is trying to use your experience for their benefit. It's when someone repeatedly turns every bump in their road into your responsibility. They don't just ask for your advice occasionally, they expect it. Every challenge they face, every decision they hesitate on, every moment of discomfort becomes a call for you to step in. They want your wisdom, your emotional labor, your clarity, but not just sometimes. They want it always, and at first you might feel compelled to give it. You've helped them before. You know how much you've grown, how many storms you've weathered, and it feels noble to share that with someone else. But over time, it begins to drain you. They no longer take initiative. They don't try to figure things out on their own. Instead, they rely on your insight like a crutch. And when you finally set a boundary, when you say, "Not this time," suddenly you're the villain. The tone changes. They act distant, cold, even resentful. As if withholding your help isn't self-preservation, it's betrayal. Here's what's really going on. They're not interested in growth. They're interested in outsourcing it. They've mistaken your generosity for obligation. They think your insight is something they're entitled to. And as long as you keep answering every call, solving every problem, and shouldering their weight, they'll never learn to carry their own. Seneca warned of this very dynamic when he said, "The slave who demands his master's service wears invisible chains." In this case, they've chained themselves to dependence, and they want you to wear the other end of it. But your experience isn't a vending machine. It was earned through your effort, your pain, your choices. It's not meant to be summoned on demand by someone who won't even try. Let me tell you about someone I once knew. His name was Jason. He had a friend named Kyle who constantly leaned on him. At first, Jason was happy to help. He'd spent years studying psychology, working on self-awareness, and becoming more emotionally grounded. Kyle would call during every life crisis, breakups, work stress, family tension, and Jason always picked up. But after a while, he realized Kyle never applied anything they talked about. He just wanted Jason to carry the emotional burden for him. And when Jason finally said, "I need to step back," Kyle got angry, not sad, not grateful for the help, just offended, like a service had been cut off. So what do you do when someone insists on being carried by your experience? First, recognize the difference between helping and enabling. Second, protect your energy. You're not selfish for choosing peace. And third, understand this. People who truly value your wisdom will never demand it. At the end of the day, your insight is a gift, not a duty. And if someone treats it like something they own, it's time to walk away. Because helping someone grow should never cost you your balance. Number 6, they use your story to gain sympathy. Let's talk about one of the most manipulative signs that someone is trying to use your experience for their benefit. It's when they take pieces of your story, your pain, your lessons, your resilience, and begin to share them in conversations that don't belong to them. But they don't do it to honor your journey or to connect meaningfully. They do it for attention. They share what happened to you because they know your story moves people, and instead of saying, "This happened to someone I deeply respect," they reframe it softly, vaguely, as if it was their own shadow they overcame. It doesn't happen all at once. It starts with little hints. You hear them recounting a friend's hardship, but the details sound a lot like yours. Later, they share your insight as if it's their conclusion. Then, one day, they're sitting in a group, receiving sympathy for a chapter they never lived. And you're left wondering, how did your suffering become their currency? Here's the truth. When someone uses your story for their own validation, it's not just disrespectful, it's dangerous. They don't carry the wounds. They haven't walked the nights that shaped those words. And yet, they wear your truth like a costume, not to educate, not to heal, but to win favor, to pull emotion, to stand in a light that was never meant for them. Epictetus said, "Truth is not a costume others can wear to win favor." And he was right, because truth is earned, it's lived. It doesn't just sound deep, it cuts. And when someone speaks your truth for applause without your consent, they rob it of its sacredness. They turn your history into their theater. Let me tell you about someone I knew. Her name was Amanda. She went through a long battle with addiction, then worked for years to rebuild her life. It was a journey of discipline, therapy, silence, and setbacks. She eventually opened up to a colleague named Jenna, trusting her with the raw, quiet parts. At first, Jenna seemed supportive. But one day, Amanda was told by another co-worker that Jenna had been sharing her experiences in a workshop, as if they were her own battles with personal demons. Amanda hadn't given permission, and while the timeline was skewed, the emotions were mirrored word for word. Jenna wasn't healing, she was performing. So what do you do when someone uses your past as their emotional bait? First, understand they're not moved by your story. They're moved by the response it gets. Second, stop feeding them. The more you share, the more they'll recycle. And third, hold your story sacred. You lived it, you survived it, you earned every word. At the end of the day, sympathy gained through stolen truths is short-lived. But the story you carry, that's eternal. And no one can perform what they didn't walk through. Number 7. They disappear once they've extracted your value. Let's talk about one of the clearest signs that someone is trying to use your experience for their benefit. It's when they show up eager, attentive, deeply invested, not in you as a person, but in what you know, what you've lived, what you've overcome. They're quick to ask questions, quick to mirror your insights, quick to learn. But the moment their cup is full, the moment they've taken what they came for, they vanish. No check-in, no thank you, no effort to give anything back, just silence. And you're left sitting there wondering, was any of that real? The conversations, the late-night talks, the vulnerability. But when you retrace it, the pattern becomes painfully clear. They were only present when you were pouring. The moment the well started to dry up, when you needed support, or when they no longer saw an advantage in staying close, they disappeared. Not because something went wrong, but because they got what they came for. Marcus Aurelius said, "The taker leaves quietly when the well runs dry, but the wise man sees them coming with empty buckets." These are the people who arrive with charm and gratitude, but only as long as the flow of value continues. They never ask how you are. They never wonder what you need, because in their mind, you're not a person, you're a resource. And once the resource is exhausted, they move on to the next. Let me share a story. A man I knew, let's call him Brian, once mentored a younger co-worker named Luke. Luke was bright, ambitious, and always asking questions about leadership, decision-making, emotional resilience. Brian saw potential and poured into him, shared books, held long conversations, even helped Luke prepare for a big internal interview. But once Luke landed the new role, he completely distanced himself. No thanks, no acknowledgement. Brian wasn't bitter, just stunned. All those hours, all that guidance, vanished like it never happened. Luke wasn't interested in building a relationship, he was gathering fuel. So how do you respond when someone uses your experience and then walks away like you never mattered? First, don't chase them. Let them go. They've already shown you what they value, and it wasn't you. Second, reflect on your own boundaries. You can be generous without being endlessly available. Third, understand this. Your wisdom is sacred. Not everyone deserves access. At the end of the day, you're not a vessel to be emptied at someone else's convenience. And just because someone leaves quietly doesn't mean you didn't give something meaningful. You did. But from now on, give with discernment. The truly wise don't just see who shows up when they're full. They watch who stays when they're not. If you found this valuable, hit like and subscribe for more powerful insights.